All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. We would like to inform all board member attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and a roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Here.
Mrs. Junk.
Here.
Mr. Carey. Here. Mr. Lawler.
Here. Mrs.
Pavlak.
Here.
Mr. Rivas.
I am present.
Mrs. Witt.
Here. All right, we have a quorum with 7 members present. Would anyone like to move something from consent to new business? All right, so we will move to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to board and superintendent salutes.
Nope, we don't have any tonight, but at the February 24th board meeting, we will have our Spelling Bee coordinators and our Spelling Bee students that were the winners from each building here to be recognized.
Good.
Great.
Good.
All right, next we'll move on to public comments. Are there any public comments tonight? Nope, seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. Tonight, the consent agenda consists of the following action items: the approval of Treasurer's Report, January 2020, approval of minutes of the January 27, 2020 regular meeting, approval of resignations, terminations, and employment of staff, approval of destruction of audio recordings from executive sessions from July 2018, approval of Kaneland Harder Middle School course book, approval of policies from press, second reading, and the following informational items: the student suspension data report, the field trip notification, and the Freedom of Information Act report. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And roll call.
Mr. Carey. Aye. Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to J1, approval of donation.
Yep, I'll turn it over to Dr. Fuchs, and she can share a little bit of information about the donation.
Great. We received a nice donation for Harder Middle School for their industrial arts program. The donation was in the form of drywall and lumber and nails at the value of about $750. It was from Dave Melton of Machuda Construction, along with or in conjunction with the Carpenters Union. The administration recommends that the board gratefully accept this donation.
Any questions or discussion?
Thank you. All right.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion that the Kaneland Board of Education accept the donation from Mr. Milton. And you can tell me the Chunda Construction and the Carpenters Union of Industrial Art Supplies valued at approximately $750 to be used in the Harder Middle School Industrial Arts classroom.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Quick question.
Oh, sorry.
Didn't we see something similar to this recently? A donation of stuff like this? Didn't we? Or was it last year? It's been that long?
I tell you what, I'm thinking it was last year because I don't think it hasn't been this winter.
Okay.
And as I think back to the fall,
May have been furniture.
furniture,
No,
yes.
I remember this type of
Supplies, I don't
stuff.
remember.
Okay.
But anyway, where I'm going
Yeah.
is the relationship between the children being in that area type of thing, or is it, it's just,
No, I don't know.
I welcome it, but I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Hi,
Don't
thank you.
know. Sorry.
Okay, and a roll call.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt. Mrs. Junk. Mr. Carey.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to J2, approval to seek bids.
Yep, I'll turn it over to Dr. Fuchs, and she'll walk us through the timeline and the process for the bids that we typically go out for annually.
Great. Thank you. As we begin again, continue, I should say at this point, preparing for the 2020-2021 school year. Each spring we seek bids for services and items. I've listed out everything on the board memo, but I'll quickly run through it for you to see if you have any questions. The 3 things that we need to do this year are copier paper, which is typical an annual contract, custodial services, which is typically a 3 to 5 year contract, and then cafeteria, food, milk, or bread. We go out to bid on this about every 3 to 5 years. We're not required to, but it's good practice to continue to make sure that we're getting the best value from the various vendors. Inevitably, though, please note, we may choose a vendor, but then if they don't have a particular product, we'll get it from a different vendor in order to make certain recipes and things like that. But we generally go with one vendor and then just supplement with the others because the prices change and the products are, what do you call it?
Question.
Hang on, perishable. Thank you, the P word. Perishable. So note that these bids here are in addition to the capital projects, which will be also going out for bid throughout the spring that the board has already approved. The ones that we do not go out for bid for this year include custodial paper supplies again. We'll get those from the cooperative. Athletic training, we believe that that's going to come in under the threshold. Copier services, we're in the middle of a contract. Numbers 4 through 10, we're all in the middle of a contract. That includes special ed transportation, snow removal, fire inspections, disposable or recycling, security, electric, and natural gas. The one on here, number 11, is one that I do want to explain and or talk about for just a moment. It's fuel. So the board approved a one-year contract last spring for this school year through June 30th. In August of 2019, so just this recent August, the law changed. Fuel is now one of the exemptions to the bidding requirement, which actually in our case is probably a good thing. Last year, I don't know if you remember or not, but we did only have one bidder for our fuel. One of the issues, one of the challenges that we have is that we do not own our own fuel tanks. They're owned by the current supplier. If we go out to bid or when we go out to bid, the person or the vendor that bids either has to provide tanks or rent the tanks from that supplier. Additionally, the number of suppliers has decreased because prior to this year, we had a supplier for probably 6 or 7 years that won the low bid, but then they went and sold their fuel business to a different supplier, and that supplier does not want to bid unless if we buy our own tanks or give them a 3-year contract. The reason for fuel that I don't typically want to do a 3-year contract is because we've done them in the past. One time, we came out ahead where we had a price here and fuel prices were here. So that was good for us. But then the most recent 3-year contract, fuel prices were here, or I'm sorry, our bid price was here, and we were, and the fuel market dropped, and for 2.5 years, we just watched the money in between. So a 1-year contract for fuel really works better in the sense that you don't have to worry about those spreads so often, in my opinion. So with that being said, fuel prices are currently at a lower point. We can contract. Given our current fuel usage, there's a potential savings somewhere around $20,000. It depends on what day we would sign and how low the market goes and things like that. I can give you more information, but what I'm asking for tonight is that the board allows or directs the administration to procure the items on page 1, and then just like we do with natural gas and electric, those are 2 other ones where it's dependent on the day of the market because it's a commodity. And so we want to negotiate the contract. As soon as we get a low day, we'll lock it in for a year, and then I can tell you what the price is and the approximate savings based on this year's price to the contracted price. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or thoughts, comments, concerns.
I vaguely remember having a conversation about buying our own fuel tanks. Did we ever look into what that would cost?
About $15,000 to $20,000 to have our own, which is fine. It's a one-time expenditure. It's the ongoing maintenance, whereas right now, if something needs to be done with them, the company that supplies them and the fuel takes care of the pumps and takes care of,
Those are relatively inexpensive items, though.
they can be, and they usually are very stable items. It's not high-tech or anything. We do have a meter on it, so that each of the bus drivers, when they log on, not log on, but use the key,
Right.
it's tracked. That way we prevent unauthorized use of our fuel.
And that's understandable. I guess next year I'd like to see the benefit of buying our own tanks or the cost benefit analysis of it. I'm sure it's too late for you to get all that done for this year, but I don't like the idea of sole sourcing anything.
And I understand and agree. I reached out to that other vendor who didn't bid last year, who's the closest to bidding. I asked him for some pricing just to see, so that I could provide you with that information. He hasn't gotten back to me yet. I can reach back out to him and see if he'll get us anything, because I agree, I don't want to depend on one vendor either,
Okay.
especially in this case.
And then are you locking in the price for the year, or are you doing plus minus?
I'm gonna do a fixed price for 1 year,
Okay.
yeah. It helps with the budgeting,
Okay.
yeah.
And how many fuel tanks are there?
We have 3, one for diesel, one for gas, and one for off-road. The
So maybe-
diesel's the biggest.
So maybe not so bad to wait till after the facility plan, I don't know, but there's 3.
2 of them reside, it would be to the east of the maintenance building. And then, of course, the big one is out by the buses.
Do you know how often they not to get too detailed into it, but you know how often those tanks require maintenance?
I don't. I would tell you a couple things. One is that they get painted either every summer or every other summer, which, is painting. And then if the pump breaks or gets slow or something, or a part needs to be replaced, then they'll come and fix that.
Not often?
At most, yeah, once or twice a year at most. I mean, they're pretty low maintenance and not, yeah,
Right.
not high tech.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other thoughts?
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion that the board direct the administration to procure the items in the memo by seeking public bids or negotiate contracts as described. Is there a motion?
So moved.
In a second? Any discussion? And a roll call.
Mrs. Pavlik?
Aye.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Barber?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt? Mrs. Junk?
Aye.
Mr. Carey? Mr. Lawler?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Move on to J3, discussion of elementary co-teaching.
Yep, for this presentation, Mrs. Eggleston, our Director of Special Education, and Mrs. Garland, Principal at Kaneland John Stewart, will come up and share some updates and some information that you also have in the board packet of what we've learned over the last couple of years and the next steps of moving forward with co-teaching across our elementary schools. So if you guys want to go ahead. And then also, if there are financial-related questions to the staffing process, Dr. Fuchs can answer those, and then the staffing piece itself as far as personnel and employees, not personnel like names of people, but the configuration of the staffing, Dr. Atkins can answer any of those questions. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you for allowing us to share co-teaching with you. As Dr. Layden said, we'd like to provide you with an update on co-teaching and then answer any questions any of you might have. So what I'd like to do is start off by revisiting what co-teaching is, and just to remind you that co-teaching is pairing one gen ed teacher with a special education teacher in the classroom to share the responsibilities of planning, instructing, and assessing students in specific areas listed in a student's IEP. Typically, the type of services that we provide for many of our students are either reading, ELA, writing, and math. We also want to revisit the rationale for why we were looking at bringing co-teaching to the elementary level. One, and not in any specific order, but the high school and the middle school have been practicing or has offered co-teaching at those two levels, and we'd like to be able to offer that opportunity to our elementary students as well. Co-teaching also allows students with disabilities the opportunity to learn alongside their peers. And then additionally, IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also asks that we do the best we can to educate students with disabilities to the maximum extent appropriate in the regular education classroom along with non-disabled peers. So what we're looking at doing is providing the instruction with their peers in the general education setting, so we're not pulling them out. So it does offer us the ability to offer another step on the continuum of services, allowing us to meet the least restrictive environment for our students with disabilities. What does successful co-teaching look like in the classroom? You will see that both teachers are actively involved in working with students. Students with IEPs, students that have disabilities, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a student that has an IEP and a student that doesn't. There's shared responsibilities in both behavior management and planning assessments, as I mentioned earlier. You would see once again, both students working, both adults working with students. They would also be communicating with all the parents, not just one special ed students with special ed, with students with parents that have special education or IEPs or non-disabled peers as well. Parents are communicating with both teachers. And also, again, most specifically that you wouldn't be able to see the difference. Everybody is working in small groups, large groups, they're mixed up and so on. So Laura is going to speak specifically in regards to how things look at John Stewart and also give you an update on the data that they've been collecting so that we can share with you the success that we've had over at Stewart.
Okay, so I am very excited to share with you the journey we've been on for 3 years. We're in our 3rd year of implementation of co-teaching at John Stewart. Our structure has remained consistent over the 3 years. We have 3 special education teachers. Each of those teachers works with 2 grade levels. They spend approximately half of their day with each of the 2 grade levels that they support. The exact minutes are determined by the student's IEP, but it roughly averages out to about half of their day with each of those grade levels. We do provide co-teaching for both reading and math services within that general education classroom. So the majority of the services they provide are related to reading and math needs. And as Fran mentioned, they share the responsibilities. So those co-teachers, when they're working together, they are collaboratively planning for the instruction of all students in that classroom, both special education and general education. They co-instruct both groups of students. And they also assess and plan for further instruction for both general education and special education students. Fran mentioned the data that we've been collecting along the way. There isn't something special and unique we've done just to monitor co-teaching. The structures that we have, and actually all of our elementary schools have allowed us to reflect on the performance of all of the students. So structures that we have across all elementary buildings are kind of multi-tiered. So we have 3 times a year data days that we engage in, and that's where we look at school-wide performance of all students. We also have grade level teams that will meet weekly, and they really focus on their grade level cohort of students and identify performance gaps, performance needs, celebrate successes. A lot of the collaboration on that specific cohort happens during those weekly grade level team meetings. And then classroom teachers focus on an individual level on students, and on a daily basis, they're engaging in assessment of student performance, both formally and informally. So that structure has allowed us to continuously monitor the progress of our students, focusing on the gains that they're making. We compare those gains relative from that co-taught classroom relative to peers in non-co-taught classrooms within the building, as well as relative to grade level peers across the district at other elementary buildings in Kaneland. So those data structures take place consistently at all 4 elementary, which gives us a good comparison set for how our students are performing in their environment. We have found in the areas of both reading and math that students who are receiving their services within that co-taught classroom, they are making growth commensurate with the IEP goals that are listed within their individual education plans. So ultimately, their success is determined by whether or not they're able to meet those goals that are established for them specifically. And we are happy to report that students with special education services are able to meet those established goals in co-taught classrooms. We also have found that the general education students within co-taught classrooms are also able to make growth and are consistently making growth consistent with their peers at John Stewart in non-co-taught classrooms, as well as at those same grade levels across the district. Fran had mentioned, again, a primary goal of adding co-teaching to the continuum of services is so that we could increase our ability to educate students with disabilities to the maximum extent possible alongside their non-disabled peers. And this structure has allowed us to do that. The IDEA really specifies that you should not remove a student with special education needs from the general education classroom unless their needs are so severe that even with the support of supplementary aids and services, they can't receive what they refer to as an appropriate education. That term appropriate education is directly from IDEA, and it's one of many, many, many undefined legal terms within IDEA. So it doesn't define exactly what constitutes appropriate. That definition has been evolving since IDEA emerged, and truly each time that a student's placement is legally challenged, the outcome of that legal proceeding helps to define what we mean by appropriate. The most common definition of an appropriate education for students with special needs is, are they able to meet their IEP goals? Those are drafted individually for them, they're monitored specifically for them, and we determine whether or not we're providing them an appropriate education by whether or not they're meeting their IEP goals. And so we are certainly happy to report that the students being serviced in co-taught classrooms are meeting their IEP goals, and therefore we consider that they are receiving an appropriate education for their needs. In determining the least restrictive environment for a student with a disability, a common question is, how does this impact the general education classroom if we're servicing students with special needs within a gen ed classroom? IDEA special education law absolutely says this is a permissible question for districts to ask. Is there a negative impact to the general education classroom when we provide services to students with special needs within general education classrooms? What the law talks about is that general education placement of the student with special needs, does it significantly impair the education of non-disabled students? Significantly impaired is another undefined term in IDEA, and so it's really left up to interpretation regarding what is considered significantly impaired. What we talk about in terms of monitoring student growth within our district is, are our students making expected levels of gains? Those expected levels are monitored year after year, cohort by cohort. A lot of educational research will give you guidelines in terms of what's expected growth for students. And so we use the most common definition of significantly impaired is, are our students not able to make those expected levels of gains? And we are happy that in our third year here, we are finding that the general education students in those co-taught environments are making gains consistent with their peers in non-co-taught classrooms, as well as gains consistent with students across Kaneland's other elementary schools. So as we near the end of our third year of co-teaching at John Stewart, we are excited that we have been able to increase the percentage of students that are receiving special education services alongside their non-disabled peers, as the law requires us to do to the greatest extent possible. Prior to starting co-teaching, 0% of our students with special needs were being educated in general education settings. The average across the 3 years that we've been co-teaching, 96 on average, 96% of our students are now receiving their special education services within co-taught classrooms. And our data supports both those undefined terms of, are we providing an appropriate education to our special education students? And our data suggests that yes, we are. And are we creating any type of significant impairment to general education students by doing so? And our data suggests that no, we are not, that they are performing relative inconsistency to their same age peers. So we overall are quite excited about our progress. We're ending our third year, pilot year this year, and so we've had our fall and our winter data days, and so far we look on target to get similar results this year that we have over the past 2 years. We will answer any questions that you might have regarding the pilot or co-teaching in general.
Any questions?
So what was the overall threshold that put it over the edge, if you will, say, yes, we should move forward to expand?
I would say, so 2 things. Again, what we're trying to do is to increase our ability to meet the needs of students with special education services in general education settings. And so our ability to do so is significantly increased as a result of co-teaching. We want to be able to do that while not having a negative impact for either special education performance gains or general education. And the data is showing that it's consistent. So those were 2 of those main criteria that we were looking to be able to impact positively, and we've gotten both of those results. I would say that, in addition to the sort of that Kaneland mantra of a Kaneland education is a Kaneland education is a Kaneland education, co-teaching has been for 10 years at the high school and middle school an option for placement. So when we're determining where a student's needs can both best be met, we look at a continuum of services. For the past 10 years, middle school and high school have had an option that elementary schools have not had. And so we're looking to gain that consistent access for all of our students. So now at the elementary level, if you happen to be a student at John Stewart, you have a pilot option that's not available at the other elementary buildings that we're seeing some really positive results with. So our second goal to push us over that threshold is, this is working really well. We want to expand this opportunity to all district students.
And what I'd like to just also add is, when we look at the individual needs of a student that has a disability, we always determine what the goal is for those students first before we consider what the placement is. So once we develop those goals, we then have to say to ourselves or to the team, where can the student be successful and move forward with their goals in the least restrictive environment. So that is one of the things that Laura's team had to do, is on an individual basis look at each of the students that they were providing services and determine whether a co-teaching learning environment would be conducive to their needs. And obviously she gave you the statistics of what percent are we at now?
In co-taught?
In co-taught, 96, okay.
Across.
So is there an issue with, so we're saying that general education students aren't significantly impaired, their education isn't significantly impaired. Does that clash with our goal of personalized learning and meeting students where they are and meeting their needs and getting them, helping them reach their potential? Because it almost sounds like
Yeah, it's not so bad for them. And I understand there's not a clear definition, but it almost sounds like we're like kind of rolling over and saying, well, they're doing okay, so that's fine. But under personalized learning, that isn't what the goal is.
Sure, yeah, and absolutely, there's a discrepancy between what the law technically requires school districts to provide and then what individual districts prioritize for their students. And so that discrepancy is going to exist in every district. In terms of personalized learning, this actually further facilitates our ability to be able to personalize instruction for students. The concept of co-teaching actually is at the premise of MTSS, which we're transitioning, eventually from RTI to MTSS, and it increases our ability to meet individual needs of students. Having two teachers being able to provide the support and the services to students within the classroom. It's two different colleagues sharing ideas, two different colleagues running small groups, conferencing with students, being aware of their individual needs. If anything, it further supports it versus impacts our ability to do so.
Do you think it equally supports it for students that are the special needs students as well as gifted students? And
For sure.
higher?
I do. I think that we think along that continuum of need, whether that need is to be enriched or enhanced or move forward or accelerated in some fashion. That happens the exact same way that it does if there's a remediation need. It helps us identify all of those individual needs and then mix those up. What's nice about co-teaching is that special education teacher isn't always the one working with students who might need some remediation or reteaching, and the general education teacher isn't always the one working with enhancement and enrichment. They share those responsibilities, each instructing all of the students in the room. So all of the students get exposure to different teaching styles and techniques and ideas.
Thank you.
And Laura, I think either you or Fran shared also that while to meet the goal of personalized learning, we're trying to move this direction. But there might be instances when a co-teaching schedule or situation for some of our students with a more exceptional disability may not be the best fit for. Is that correct also?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So that it's always, the placement consideration is always individualized for every student. And so a piece of least restrictive environment in IDEA really talks about it absolutely is permissible and districts should consider the impact on the general education setting when making a placement. And it specifically talks about if a significant impairment is identified for the general environment, then that is not the least restrictive environment for that student, that the placement has to work for the entire classroom or the entire group. Although the IEP is for that individual child, if it's having a negative impact or a significant impairment, that would not be considered the least restrictive for that student. Right. Yeah.
So the co-teacher, is he or she a teacher? I think I heard special ed teacher.
Yeah, they're certified special education teachers.
Right, so they're actually teachers?
Yes.
Okay. In this environment, what are some challenging items, if you will, that these teachers face?
Well, Mrs. Full, who's here tonight, received an email from a lovely, endearing note from a student telling her she's the best student teacher ever. And so one of the...
It's a compliment.
She's a well-versed educator of many years of experience. And so what we work really hard on is to make sure that those students understand that they are both equal teachers, instructors, assessors, planners, collaborators. We work on that with both students and families, that both of these teachers sort of have that equal weight of the classroom. I would say initially some of the things that we worked through were special education teachers typically are the experts in terms of modifying and adjusting instructional techniques and strategies, where the classroom teachers are more the content experts, and so we had to be really intentional about merging those skills. We had some training on multiple different styles of co-teaching. What our biggest thing we wanted to avoid was one teacher doing all of the instruction and the other teacher just sort of being available, maybe to redirect attention or something like that. Getting them both fully vested and equally responsible for those students was something we were very intentional about. We do that primarily through giving them common planning time so that they are planning, instructing, and assessing jointly, sharing ideas. That's probably the biggest hurdle maybe that we needed to overcome, was merging their expertise and giving them the time to learn from each other.
Do you experience any pushback
From
the
staff
general one,
or
if you
from-
will, and the special ed teacher, the sharing of the?
Not pushback per se in terms of so pushback only in the sense of, let's figure out the logistics to this specific problem. Philosophically, none whatsoever. Philosophically, everybody believes this absolutely aligns with what we're required to do and with best practice in research and special education. There's no question about the philosophy of it. Logistically, there is problems that need to be worked through in terms of not all grade levels have equal numbers of students with special education needs. Minutes aren't equal across grade levels. Scheduling, finding the time to collaborate, to be prepared to co-teach. Those are more the logisticals. Something we've talked with other buildings about are whether you have co-teaching or not, these are the same logistical issues that you're working through. We just choose to work through the co-teaching ones versus work through the ones that come up when you don't have co-teaching. There's never enough time in the day or people in the building. And so those problems are not specific to co-teaching.
So this is in your school presently, right? So how many partnerships do you have? Is it only one, or you have?
So there are 3 special education teachers, and they each co-teach with 2 general education teachers at 2 different grade levels. So partnerships, there's 6 different partnerships. 3 of those have the same co-teacher, though.
So you have 3 then?
We have
three special ed teachers that do
Yep.
this?
We have 3 special education teachers, but there's 6 grade levels. So each of those special education teachers co-teaches at 2 grade levels.
Sure. And is that what we're asking, adding 3 times the 3 other schools?
No,
Meaning
not
12?
immediately. Do you want to give a little bit of an update of what's happening in the other buildings now, and then what it would look like when we move forward with 1 teacher per building?
Sure. Well, just to start is when we started the pilot over at Stewart, we were able to trade out 2 program paras for an additional certified staff member. So that's how we were able to meet the needs of being able to have 3 special ed teachers, and then they were each working with 2 grade levels at a time. The other 3 elementary schools are all dabbling in it in one way or another. I believe there's at least 1 or 2 grade levels doing some co-teaching, because we've continued the training based on the interest in their building, but we haven't forced anybody to do anything yet. So they've taken advantage of the training, and in some cases, some of the teacher pairs are getting the ongoing coaching as well. In others, they are not yet. Until we came to a decision of where we're going, we were limited in the number of pairs, but they are doing them in each of the building. So what we are looking at, in each of the other elementaries, there are program paras that are tied to the instruction or the resource support that we do offer. We're looking at doing that, trading out those 2 positions and adding a certified staff member in those places, just like we did over at John Stewart. Is that any
Yes,
other
thank you.
information
Yep.
that you were looking for?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're replacing some with others, with teachers, right? Parapros or
Yes.
teachers?
Yes. Because that's what we did initially at John Stewart. to get to that level. So what we would do is replicate the same thing for the other 3 buildings right now. And as Mrs. Eggleston shared, the other buildings have undergone some training to move that direction and are ready and will be ready to implement in the fall after the staffing plan is presented.
I know there's totally different, well, my judgment, let me not judge that. So there's special ed teachers compared to parapros, and we've been building up to this. Have the parapros been given the opportunity to get in those positions other than being a teacher, obviously? Or does it require a special ed teacher?
Yes. Yeah, it'd be
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, special education teacher with the teacher certificate. If there are paraprofessionals that have that background, they're always encouraged to apply and stay within our district for those teaching positions, for sure.
Okay.
So it seems to be working at Stewart. How are we going to measure that it's working at the other 3 schools?
Go ahead. Certainly, we've had many conversations administratively with the other elementary principals. I would imagine the exact same way. The benefit is that we utilize common assessments across the 4 elementary buildings, which gives us that comparison base. We run very similar structures in terms of that tiered system of data review from whole school to grade level cohorts to individual students. And so they're welcome to my spreadsheets that I've been maintaining meticulously, and so certainly willing to share the same structures that we've done. We already, even in our individual day-to-days building per building, the data that we look at is district-wide data. So how are we comparing to other elementary buildings and established standards? So it would proceed similarly, that they would be monitoring that progress the same way we do for all students, and using those same definitions that are developing with those undefined terms.
And you had expressed that at the last board meeting about how would we, any pilot or anything that we start new, how are we going to continue to make sure that this is the right thing we should be doing for students? So we would absolutely continue to utilize the information in all 4 buildings, just like Laura is using in her building. And we would constantly monitor the progress or lack of it with both gen ed and special ed students in the co-teaching versus the non-co-taught classroom. So that would be ongoing.
Okay. Thank you.
How much variability do you find in IEP minutes and just the ability to sort of, it sounds like have a consistent amount of staff in all 4 buildings? Is that just the law of averages, it works out that way, or does that not really?
Well,
Yeah.
Probably Fran is a better one to answer that. She communicates with all the buildings and maintains more spreadsheets to track the number of special education minutes that each case manager is servicing at each grade level. So she maintains all of those documents that we all have access to see what those needs are. There's certainly variances grade level to grade level, building to building, and then staffing patterns reflect the need of those things. So John Shields has I believe the highest number of students with special education minutes and services. They also have additional staff to support those.
So they get more than 3, I guess is that in the plan, or?
They currently have 3
Have 3.
to manage the caseloads that they currently
So you're
have.
thinking they would have
So they
4.
would need another one. We wouldn't, just 3 wouldn't be
3
enough.
paras or 3 teachers?
I'm sorry?
3 paras or 3 certified staff?
They have 3 certified staff members, special ed teachers, just due to the high number of kids that they are serving in that building. They're pretty high.
But if I understand the concept, generally you're trying to do a 2-for-1, so you're going to add 3 more at that, then
We would add 1 more to that building.
One to Blackberry, one to McDowell, one to.
And 1 at Blackberry Creek, 1 at McDowell, and 1 at John Shields. 1 additional special ed teacher.
Parents for that.
So there's 3 total.
Yes, correct.
John Shields currently has 3 special education teachers and 2 program assistants.
Okay.
To co-teach, they would add 1 additional special ed for a total of 4
Okay. I'm sorry, I
in
misunderstood
exchange for
what you're
those 2
saying earlier.
pairs.
Okay.
How do the kids, I mean, you got special needs children and regular students in the classes. correct? How are the regular students, are they helpful? Are they,
Oh my gosh, yes.
yeah? Okay.
A resounding yes to that question. I would say most of the time, they are not aware of who has IEPs and who does not.
Right.
For something like a specific learning disability, that's not a disability that's physically worn by a child, so in
Right.
most cases, they don't know. In situations where it is a more physical type of need that is identified by students, our biggest problem is over-supporting by peers, and so we work on teaching them to help their peers gain independence and do
Right.
things independently, so
So they are very much involved,
extremely.
Okay. which helps the other students too.
It helps everybody.
Yeah.
Are you seeing the special ed students move up and out of, out of needing their IEPs? I don't know if you have any data that would support that specifically, but.
What we have seen is a decrease in the need for adult support when students are in co-taught settings, and so we have decreased the number of one-on-one and classroom paraprofessionals assigned specifically to students, and so that's a real positive in terms of being able to increase their independence. In terms of dismissal from special education services, have we had?
Moving up.
Oh, for sure making progress,
Yeah.
making progress, closing that gap, meeting their IEP goals, absolutely. We have had students that no longer require services. That's just so individualized based on what combination of needs they have.
How is our supply of, or availability to get, can't think of the word, teacher gets sick, you need another one.
Subs, thank you.
I could think of it in Spanish, but it wouldn't come out.
Spanish.
Yeah,
Bilingual.
I would say it's improving. From my perspective, we still have a substitute shortage, but we are adding substitutes daily. That's not a unique special education problem. Substitutes can sub in any of those positions, and so
Do they have to be special ed teachers?
to just be a daily substitute, they do not have to be a special ed. They just have to be a certified substitute.
Just a long-term sub.
A long-term sub beyond so many weeks, yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Sounds good.
No? Thank you. Thanks for coming out again.
Thank you.
All right, so I think that required no action, so we
Correct.
will move on to, where's my agenda? Superintendent report.
Yeah, this Friday, first of our updates that I have to share, 4 or 5 updates. This Friday, we do have a school improvement day, so our staff will continue to work on these types of initiatives and other items. And again, it is it's a non-attendance day for students, followed with the long weekend with Monday being President's Day, so there's no school for our students on Friday or Monday. So parents, sorry about that.
I was gonna say thank you, but-
Staff, good, yeah.
Brian,
Sorry.
we're thinking the same thing.
Then our Kaneland Connect Strategic Plan Committee continues to meet. We have two scheduled meetings left. We have February 18th and March 18th. So next Tuesday night, the day after President's Day, we have our next meeting, and Board Member Witt and President Sparber both serve on that committee, and we will provide additional updates. That first meeting, we looked at some we're going to look at some comparable data, and we also looked at the survey results. If you recall, we asked parents to do a survey. We had about 440, and staff, 440 responses. So we'll continue to meet looking at comparable data. So one of the things we are looking at is our district data, and the planning committee will get that on Tuesday night, and then our board at the next school board meeting will also have the same presentation. So based on the timeliness, usually we like to come to our school board first, but because of the planning of the strategic planning committee, we need to have it go there first, and then it will come to our board. So you guys will hear it twice. So,
I was thinking maybe we didn't have to come. No,
yeah, no, we want you here. And then the Kaneland Foundation met last week, and we did not have a quorum, so we couldn't take any official action, but we did receive the treasurer's update, which is very similar to the previous meeting, since we haven't had any fundraisers over the last, since the fall, the golf outing. And we are continuing to look at what the foundation could look like with a different format. We still are waiting for some information on a grant that we've applied to that may help us in some of the training and facilitating that our current committee members may benefit from. But we don't have that information yet. So we weren't able to do much action without a quorum and without some of the information about the grant that we've applied for. But hopefully we'll have more of that at the next meeting after we meet in April. Then the Hall of Fame Committee meets, which is Mrs. Pavlak next week. And one of the things we do at the February meeting, if you recall, we will look at our final nominees and we will vote and take action, the Hall of Fame will. And then also at that same meeting, we look for the dates, venues, and times for the recognition of those inductees. And as you recall, traditionally, we try to have those events mirror their background. So if it was something in the athletic realm, it's the sports awards night. If it's something in the arts, it's the art awards. Or if it's academic or academic related in what they've excelled in to be nominated, then it's at the Academic Achievement Awards. So we'll have that update. And then also, traditionally, on this time of year, next Saturday, the 22nd, or the following Saturday, we have our Young Knights Kindergarten Registration Roundup and Literacy Fair all at the same time. So that's where we look forward to our new kindergartners and the class of, I don't even know what it is, 18 years down the road, the class of 2040 almost. What is it? The class of 2033. So we will welcome a class of 2033 on Saturday, the 22nd. So those are, there'll be another.
We're laughing at that. That's you, Aaron.
I know, all right, that's me.
So those are the superintendent reports that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. We had an FAC meeting last Thursday night. We had a quorum, so that was nice. We updated the final changes to our charter, which changed it from a board committee to an administrative committee. Additionally, we reviewed the financial projections and the budget information.
Great. All right, looks like we will move on to topics for future agendas. Any?
Just a quick question. Have you moved any on the core master plan at all? Or anything?
Sure. I just received an email later this afternoon with confirming dates from the architects. So now I've got dates from a few of the committee members who we know need to be there, like the high school principal. And I've got the architect dates, so I'm assuming that tomorrow, hopefully, I can get that out to the committee members and maybe get something on the calendar. So it's been trying to coordinate everybody's calendars and schedules.
Awesome.
So we should be,
But it's anticipated spring dates, correct?
yeah.
In the next couple.
I've got a couple dates here in February and a couple in March. Thank you. They're, and then hopefully it'll fit with everybody's calendar from that point forward. So,
Thank you.
you bet.
Okay, this is the second opportunity for public comment. Any public comment? No? So we will move on. I guess. So we have no executive session tonight. So our video will conclude at the end of the meeting here. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
In a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Told